It's Will Smith, the nicest man in Hollywood. How you gonna be smacking somebody on global TV? Like, dude, what were you thinking?
This is the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He wouldn't commit a violent act. That's nuts to even think that.
You can't script this. The person who's responsible for the slap wins an Academy Award and has to give a speech. I mean, the whole thing is surreal.
No, this can't be real. Not tonight. Not tonight.
You look at the history of Hollywood, the first African-American to win an Academy Award is Hattie McDaniel in 1940. And when she attended the ceremony, she had to sit in a separate section from the other white nominees. It takes 24 years before another African-American wins an Academy Award, Sidney Poitier. So there's a history.
Even in terms of modern times, right? So let's say post-civil rights movement, right? The Oscars still seem to be just as white as it was, prior to all of that. And so you're asking yourself, is it really a case of, these are the best films and these are the best actors and directors and et cetera? Or is it there's this unconscious bias in which you automatically hold the performance of a white actor or actress higher than you would that of a person of color?
I don't know if we will ever see a time in you or my lifetime where art will be looked at exactly for that without some kind of color or circumstance placed on it. Can we just acknowledge people's work for what it is? Can we just do that?
Well, in 2015, Oscar So White was used to describe a scenario where a very small number of nominees of color in the prominent categories at the Oscars.
And what happened as a result of that is a bunch of studios started coming up with DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity departments to try to counteract that criticism, right?
They have worked to be more inclusive, but I'm not gonna, encourage you to give yourselves a round of applause because in the last 5 years you acknowledged Black people existed. Like, I'm just not gonna do that because we all know that it was racism that kept them out. So I'm not going to reward you for no longer being racist.
The 2022 Oscars was sort of the make good on Oscars So White. We're going to have a Black producer. We've got multiple Black people who are nominated. So this was going to be a year of celebration where Black excellence was really going to be front and center. And Will was going to be a big part of that because he was going to get the big award of the night. He was going to be the best actor.
He's up there with the Tom Cruises, the Cate Blanchetts of that ilk of our generation. You put his name above the title and people will go see the film.
But he is like one of those, he's right up there with Glenn Close. It's like, how on earth did we get this far and he hasn't won an Oscar? And King Richard was, everybody loved King Richard and he really, knocked it out of the park.
When I saw King Richard, I thought there's just no way that he could be denied this time. Everyone knew he was going to win that night.
Pretty much when you're covering the Oscars, your job is to photograph everything. If it moves, just cover it as much as possible.
Capture backstage scenes, moments that people don't ordinarily get to see.
During commercial breaks, look for famous people in the audience and whatever they're doing.
Maybe someone being tense and nervous before going on stage, or getting prepped to go on stage, or coming off and celebrating their Oscar win.
So you're just photographing everything. There's no break.
My assignment that night was writing a live blog. Just basically a conversation. Mary McNamara, another columnist with the Times, she and I were going to watch the ceremony and just comment on what we were watching on the television.
We were just sort of commenting in real time on, everything that was unfolding.
I covered this incident, if you will, from a variety of different perspectives. There was the professional perspective, which is I'm an op-ed columnist for the LA Times. But then there was the everyday regular Black man version that was covering this on social media like, holy crap, oh my God, I can't believe it just happened.
I was kind of bored. I was waiting for something to happen. Did I bring this on because I was bored? Was I hoping for something to happen? Was it my fault? Maybe. I don't know.
Chris Rock was presenting the Oscar for documentary, and it was anticipated that that would go to this great movie, The Summer of Soul, which Questlove directed. And I think everyone was excited to see what Questlove was going to say on stage. Everybody loved this documentary.
He made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith, who had showed up at the Oscars with her head shaved. And he made a really lame G.I. Jane joke that honestly I don't think many people would even get, since that's kind of an old movie.
Why did your jokes go there? You have a whole room full of celebrities. You have so much stuff going on. And that's where you went, making fun of this black woman's hair?
I'm not trying to throw shade, but you're making G.I. Jane jokes after 2020? Like, what are we doing here?
Chris should have known better, should have known that she has this condition, alopecia, which causes some of her hair to fall out, and that's why she had shaved her head, so that apparently so that her hair wouldn't look patchy.
If you wanted to make a joke about a woman, particularly a black woman, who has a clean-shaven head, after the global success of Black Panther, which featured nothing but gorgeous black women with bald heads, there is a more current joke that could have been made that actually probably would have been less insulting.
When Chris told the joke, you see Will Smith laughing. And then like seconds later, you see him walking up to the stage and you're like, is this planned? Is this a joke? Is this part of the broadcast?
So I just kind of like peered over a little bit and I see this figure walking up. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, is that the stage manager? Or, is there something going on? And then someone said, hey, that's Will Smith. And as I was making the move, I see the arm kind of coming up out of this, the corner of my eye.
And then all of a sudden, he's striding up on stage and striking Chris Rock, like hard.
I missed it by a split second, but I just kind of grabbed the autofocus and the shutter at the same time and just squeezed it.
I remember looking over and seeing Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Francis Ford Coppola watching Chris Rock give his speech or his monologue, and then all of a sudden Will Smith did his thing and it was on the monitors and we all kind of stopped, and I believe it was De Niro that leaned over at Pacino and go, what just happened?
You can see Will Smith's body language where he just made the swing, and then you had that great reaction from Chris Rock. But it's just one of those moments where this image will live with Chris Rock forever.
It wasn't just about the act, it was who did the act that raised it up for me to an oh shit moment, because Will had been so careful to crafting his public persona. And here you are now on Oscar night deciding you're gonna be the alpha in a room full of Hollywood alphas.
Well, when the slap happened, everyone thought it was a gag.
I thought that it was a planned bit, so I really didn't think too much of it.
I'm telling you, as a black woman, when the way he walked, it was the swagger and the walk that he had when he went up there. I was like, this ain't no joke.
I was horrified and shocked. Is the only way that could describe how I felt about it, and everything else just became a blur.
And now Chris has to decide, what am I gonna do? As I say, what if he responds? Then what conversation are we having? What if it turned into a real fight? There's some people who would have knocked the shit out of Will Smith for that, regardless of the circumstances.
Then he walks off stage, sits down, and then starts screaming profanities.
That's when he screamed out, his famous line, which is, keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth.
If you're watching it at home, you're just hearing beeps and like long silences, like where the sound is dropping out on the telecast.
That's when I went from oh to a different oh, because then it was a matter of me processing as a black man what white people are going to say. It's like, oh man, here it comes.
It was madness. It was a crazy moment.
I thought, oh my God, this is gonna be huge.
That was somebody that had some mental stuff going on, that was keeping it in because he had a certain image that he was trying to keep, and that image just exploded like a grenade that night.
Boom! Social media is exploding, Twitter's on fire, people are all of a sudden tuning in.
All over social media, they're saying he should be hauled out of the Oscars, and everybody's like, well, is that something that we do? And
Social media made the moment worse because everybody chimed in and talked about it. And instead of trying to understand it, it was just a regurgitation of what happened, and social media does what social media does because everyone's bullhorn is the same.
I think the tone of the live blog shifted in the same way that the tone of the whole ceremony shifted. I remember speaking with someone afterward who was there at the Oscars, and they just said that the air in the room just completely deflated.
Chris Rock was giving the Oscar for The Summer of Soul, which was also really terrible.
And then I think Questlove gets up to make a speech and like nobody remembers that, right? Because it's in the shadow of this moment.
Because the moment that the slap occurred, the show was completely derailed and all attention was on that incident.
Questlove deserved his moment, and his moment was taken away from him.
It made everything so bad that night because there was a production team that was all black behind it. You know, the producer was black, the writers were black, everything about it was blackety black, black, black.
All you're thinking is, Will Smith is probably gonna win Best Actor, and so you're just waiting for him to come up on stage, and what is he gonna say? Or is Will Smith even gonna be allowed to come up on stage?
I was pretty shocked when he got up and started talking. I thought, like, what's he gonna say at this point? How do you pull yourself together and address what just happened? And he kind of didn't.
It's like this guy just assaulted somebody. Now he's giving this magnanimous speech. In some ways, it kind of touches on the fact that this whole thing is Hollywood. Like, that's the only way you can really think about it.
I thought somewhere in the speech, he would have, after taking a beat to calm down, would have apologized. And he opted not to do that. And that was disappointing.
I did not see Will Smith, the star. I did not see, the performer everybody loves. He was just a broken person getting up and totally stripped bare.
I just felt a pit in my stomach when I saw people give him a standing ovation after that, because he didn't do what he needed to do, was make it right.
What is the proper response from a predominantly white audience in that moment? Because there's so much more at play than just the slap.
I just saw this room full of white people, white celebrities, white Hollywood, saluting a black artist who had just committed an act of assault against another black artist.
There's Oscars So White hanging over your head. There's the visual of a room full of white people not looking happy that a black man has won this award. There's the people who have worked with Will over his 20+ year career, 30-year career, and only have good thoughts about him, and aren't going to throw 30 years of goodwill, pun intended, out the window because of a couple of seconds that happened right in front of you in a heated moment that you don't fully understand.
What Will and his family did that night after the Oscars was disgusting.
And then there's footage later on that night of him dancing and having a good time. You assaulted a man in public.
To dance, to smile, to act like nothing happened.
The optics of Will Smith dancing at the Vanity Fair party did not sit well with people.
People had a meltdown. They're like, how dare you? How dare you go and celebrate after what you did?
It was kind of like, oh, dude, I guess, have fun tonight because tomorrow is not going to be good for you. Tomorrow is going to be a bad day for you.
What Will needed to do after he finished dancing or getting out of whatever nutty state of mind he was in that night was to address the situation immediately.
The first person to call is Chris Rock, if you're going to be apologetic.
He brings the most comedy genius. It's his movie.
Hold a press conference the next day or do something that would have addressed what he did immediately and show that remorse that he neglected to do.
If you're not going to apologize to Chris Rock, then the rest of it is performance.
He issued an apology, I think, that day, on Instagram, dude, you better be calling Oprah right now. Like, you better be planning that, you know, apology interview, because like just posting something is just not cool.
I started getting emails from Academy members the next morning, even probably that evening, going, they didn't handle this too well. Why was Will Smith still in the theater?
I saw people praising Will Smith for defending his wife. I saw people say, you know, he should have been escorted out by the LAPD. And because he was defending his wife as opposed to himself, I think that does add a slight sympathetic factor maybe among many people.
Whoever says he's defending his wife, that's bullshit. He's not defending his wife. And then secondly, if you want to talk about it in terms of gender, is that not sexist? This assumption that, like, you know, the man has to come to the woman's rescue because she's some frail, meek thing that, like, you know, can't handle what goes on public. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Like, there was a lot of commentary about like how barbaric this was and how horrible of Will Smith. He's a human being, and somebody completely insulted his wife. You know, if the comedian from the stage was picking on something that was a medical issue, in that situation, I saw Chris Rock's assault more egregious than Will Smith's.
Apple had this movie, Emancipation. It was going to be a pretty high-profile award season contender for 2022, heading into 2023. In the immediate aftermath of the slap, there was a thought that they were going to just shelve it for at least a year.
He still could have gotten nominated for Emancipation, I guess, if people had paid attention to the movie or felt that his performance transcended whatever he did. But I think right now, Will Smith in Hollywood is more or less irrelevant.
I think the reaction would be very different had he slapped a white comedian. Or even if he slapped a comedian of another race who was not black. I think the response to the whole thing would be very different. But he slapped a black comedian who people sometimes feel has inappropriate jokes. He's not going to suffer much of anything, really, other than take a time out, and when we move far enough away from it, then you can kind of come back.
If Will Smith had hit a white man, we wouldn't have seen Will Smith for the rest of the night. I'm just keeping it real. If he had hit anybody else that was of any other ethnicity other than black, we wouldn't see him. He'd be sitting in a jail cell somewhere right now. But because it was another black man, as a black woman in America and a black person in the entertainment industry, it just made me sad.
You assaulted a man in public. But a lot of people don't look at it that way because it's two black men. And the negative stereotypes a lot of people have about black men is that they're inherently violent anyway, and so this is not a big deal.
I do not speak for the entire community of color because I am one little black woman in a whole zeitgeist full of people. But having said that, I believe that particular incident has really made a negative impact when it comes to African Americans in the community. And I know that's a ginormous statement to make, but in the core of my heart, I believe it's true.
In trying to get a sense of how the black creative community feels, my feeling is that there is still a great discomfort because these two guys are so beloved. And there isn't any, I dare to say, there isn't anybody in the black creative community who doesn't hold these two artists in the highest regard.
It's not like he, went and lit a school bus of children on fire. It's not like he killed somebody. He slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars after Chris Rock said something horrible about his wife and verbally assaulted her. So, what do we expect at this point? I mean, he has somewhat apologized. Could he do more? Sure. But when is this gonna end?
The slap is still a shiny toy. It's still something that people can make memes out of, people can make jokes out of. So it's hard to move past it, I think, because it's still such it stands out so much. It just stands out as something that we probably have seen only once in our lifetime and may never see again.
I mean, you know, Tom Cruise has recovered from some stuff. He recovered from jumping on Oprah's sofa. He recovered from, you know, some things that surrounded him regarding Scientology. But Tom Cruise is also a white man in Hollywood. So I think race plays a huge part in all of this, in this whole situation. There's a different set of rules for black people than there are for white people. It's unspoken, nobody talks about it, but everybody knows about it.
I think it is important to talk about it, particularly a year later, because a lot has happened over the course of a year. And the way that we may feel about that incident may have been shaped and changed. A year ago, it was Will Smith hitting Chris Rock, two black men engaged in violence. Obviously, we know with the Tyree Nichols video, we have a different sort of visual of black men attacking one another. And our views have been changed and shaped, and our emotions about it have been altered a little bit. Maybe we don't laugh the next time we see something like that on stage. Maybe we're reminded of the horrific video and we write about it differently. We cover it differently. We internalize it differently.
When everybody's breaking the film down like it's the Zapruder film afterwards, and it's like, well, he laughed at the joke initially, and you know, so there's all that as well. And in some ways, honestly, I mean, I can sit here and talk about this in the way that I do, but in some ways, there's no explanation for what happened. It was just crazy. I mean, really, like, you know, what else can you say?